Pete Hegseth, co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend. So, Pete, this has really put Democrats on the ground in a stuck place. To have Washington, D.C. heads spending money through their PACs and such to help people across the aisle.
Yeah, I mean, it's sheer political cynicism. It shows you they don't believe their rhetoric of threats to democracy. We're not a democracy. That's the phrase they always use. I also won't buy into far-right or extremist candidate. If you look at Don Bolduc, he's a mainstream, America First Republican candidate. And to say that he's extreme would mean that Maggie Hassan on the other side would be extreme because she believes in abortion all the way until effectively the moment of birth. This is the national Democrats trying to pick the Republican they would prefer in order to keep that seat. I understand that. That's politics. We get that. But at the end of the day, it's we, the people, the voters, who should get a chance to decide. And this is not just Democrats. Mitch McConnell's doing the same thing, trying to say we have candidates who are unelectable as opposed to supporting good candidates. If we told Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz, if the establishment had chimed in then, they wouldn't be senators. They would have been too extreme. Or they're principled and can articulate, and the voters are going to be drawn to them, then you stand beside them. This is rank politics. Of course, it's hypocrisy. It means they don't believe their own rhetoric about threats to democracy. And the voters will decide today. And a guy like Don Bolduc, who's been in the military for 37 years, don't tell him he's a threat to democracy. He understands what this republic's all about.
As you're speaking, though, I'm thinking of something else that could potentially be happening, because you're talking about the establishments, and you gave examples on both sides of the political aisle there. You're talking about establishments that don't want to give up the power that they have in Washington.
Correct.
Because if you let too many people come in who are a little bit different than you are, it gets harder to push them around. And look, anybody who that shirt fits can wear it. Okay, a couple of pieces now on the Democrats' meddling strategy. The New York Post editorial board with the headline, Dems $53 million spending on MAGA Republicans, belies just how cynical their threat to democracy cries really are. Yeah, because if they believed it, why are they spending cash? And the liberal Washington Post, with the practice, has divided Democrats, with some of the party now complaining that such tactics are risky and could ultimately result in the election of candidates who pose serious threats to democracy. All told, Democrats directly interfered in at least 13 primaries, 6 gubernatorial races, 2 Senate contests, and 5 House campaigns. Pete, your reaction?
It's all poll tested. It's come from the top of the White House with Joe Biden giving the clarion call that our political opponents are to be dehumanized and called far-right extremists for holding positions like believing we have a border, supporting our police, supporting the overturning of Roe v. Wade, believing that the debacle in Afghanistan was just that, a debacle. So ultimately, stepping back, it's really about 2 things for Democrats: Roe v. Wade and abortion, and the 2016 and really the 2020 election. Because if we took every Democrat who called into question the 2016 election and its legitimacy and said, you're extreme and you can't run again, they'd lose half their caucus. So they take a guy like Don Bolduc or others who say, I don't feel like 2020 was above board, and they say, election denier, extremist, MAGA Republican, threat to democracy. Don't allow them to do that. These candidates are mainstream Republican candidates who deserve the support of Mitch McConnell when they win their primaries. He needs to stop running around and criticizing the strength of candidates as opposed to pouring money in to support the winners. And we know $53 million is a drop in the bucket for Democrats, and they're trying to shape the field. It's prep the field for candidates they like. I don't think it'll work. I hope not.
Prep the field for candidates they like. It helps the establishment in Washington, D.C. retain some oxygen in the room for themselves. And it really divides the party. I'm curious to know how they go forward. We'll be perched and watching 56 days from today. Chief Justice John Roberts doubling down on the legitimacy of the U.S. Supreme Court. Vice President Kamala Harris is continuing to get backlash after she said this about the court's controversial decision to overturn Roe versus Wade.
I think this is an activist court.
What does that mean?
It means that we had an established right for almost half a century, which is the right of women to make decisions about their own body, and this court took that constitutional right away. And we are suffering as a nation because of it.
Justice Roberts says nope.
Has always decided controversial cases. The decisions have always been subject to intense criticism. Lately, the criticism is phrased in terms of, because of these opinions, it calls into question the legitimacy of the court. I don't understand the connection between opinions that people disagree with and the legitimacy of the court. If the court doesn't retain its legitimate function of interpreting the Constitution, I'm not sure who would take up that mantle.
It's called a tantrum. And if you've ever had a toddler in your house, you
Yes.
know that they question you when they don't get their way.
I've taken issue with a lot of the decisions Chief Justice Roberts has made, but he's spot on in this case. Find me one Republican when a decision came down, or conservative, that they didn't like, that questioned the very legitimacy of the Supreme Court. Whereas right now, mainstream Democrats, left-wingers across the spectrum, have called into question whether the Supreme Court is legitimate, calling it activist. You know why? Because they didn't like the decisions. They, of course, would never characterize the Warren Court, say, of the 50s and 60s, of being an activist court, providing decisions like Roe v. Wade that have led to a Supreme Court today looking at the Constitution and saying that right to privacy is not one that's to be found in the Constitution, and so we're going to rule the way we believe based on presidents who are elected who nominated chief justices. We can disagree. The problem is the left doesn't want to disagree. They want to shut down and control. This coming from a vice president, you want to talk about dangerous? They talk about dangerous rhetoric, dangerous candidates. This is as dangerous as it gets to call into question the institution. And again, it all comes back to abortion. We should never forget how central that is to the political power of the modern Democrat Party. And that's why you're seeing what you correctly said, Harris, a tantrum, because they didn't like the decision.
Well, look, and, you can't connect dots yet, but we do know what violence looks like when people feel like the U.S. Supreme Court should be the target. We've already seen it. An assassination attempt on conservative Justice Brett Kavanaugh. You have empirical evidence there, that anything can happen that is not good when you handle it this way.
Yeah, not to mention vandalism and attacks on pro-life centers ever since, as if they're the source of the problem for this. It's a dangerous moment, and they're fanning the flames, both by funding candidates they say are extreme, to our first topic, and then also calling into question this court. Who would have decided 2000? Talk about elections, if not for the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. So dangerous, and that's why it's the left-wingers, the Democrats, who are really extreme in this process. But, of course, they're gaslighting.
Well, look, voters, no matter how they vote, deserve better than this from the left. All right, we'll move. Sure. Pete, thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.